Corey Hetherman coming in at Miami. I'm rehashing this debate that we
All
had.
right. Okay.
This has to
I knew you were going to go here. I'm so glad you went here. I knew it.
Blake, this has to be a part of the conversation of most impactful defensive coordinator hires because Miami was so freaking close to being a playoff team. They had everything that they needed. And I know that they're replacing Cam Ward and they're replacing a couple other dudes on offense. I'm not worried about offense. Shannon Dawson's a great OC. Their defense was a shit show for a lot of the stuff that you talked about. Poor tackling. There was a lack of overall fundamentals. It's the same thing that we saw with Alex Grinch and then eventually D'Anton Lynn taking over at USC. Heatherman was quietly one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. I've pointed this out. I faced him when he was
from Minnesota,
coming from Minnesota, and I faced him when he was at James Madison and when he was at Maine. Both times, incredible defenses. And I didn't even totally register this until we did a little bit of we had this original conversation. But this past year, they were 10th in opponents' points per game. They were 20th in yards per rush. They were 21st in rush yards per game. And then in pass yards per game, pass yards per attempt, they were 19th. And pass yards per game, they were 11th. They only allowed 181 pass yards per game. Just like we talk about with a lot of these things, this is not an immediate fix. But if I'm trying to go with somebody who is going to reset the mentality, the approach, the focus, I'm going with a young, up-and-coming guy like Heatherman, who you saw last year with a third of the level of prospect talent that Minnesota had to pull from to use, that he had a bunch of dudes who were hitting hard and that were fundamentally sound as shit against the run and against the pass. That's how you get better. You bring in a guy like this that transformed the defense as quickly as he did at a lower program.
I'm not going to let you get away that you love a guy because you played against him and he beat you.
But I didn't even notice that. I didn't even. Well, I've glazed the shit out of Curt Cignetti, and I went up against Curt Cignetti for 2 years when I was in college too.
Okay, fair.
I have the context.
All right. The talent level is risen from what he had at Minnesota to what he has now at Miami. Again, I go back to the same thing that I was talking about just previously with Tom Allen. Joe, there's not a lot. I'm not trying to argue here, but here's the fundamental truth. If you're getting lost in man-to-man coverage, just stay with me.
Okay.
Just stay with me. I question if it's a personnel issue or a coaching issue. So, what I would say is, I don't think that Lance Guidry, first year then going into second, just completely sucked. I do not believe that how good they were in his first year was completely indicative of what they did. Now, I will say this. I think that sometimes you are correct. A change of face can help. Okay, but listen, I have seen teams, a lot of teams, make changes and things don't get fixed until personnel gets fixed. Now, they brought in some different pieces from the portal at safety and things like that from Wisconsin, whatever. That will help. I'm with you there. There just comes a point in time where, Joe, why do I have a gut feeling that Mario and a Mario Cristobal-led team will continuously let me down? See, everybody wants to point at Lance Guidry and the defense last year, where I don't disagree with what they did defensively. I was the one saying before they lost the second game that if they keep allowing these explosive plays, somebody's going to clip them. They got clipped twice. My whole point in this, that's not that Manny Diaz. That is, we were just talking about him. That is a Mario Cristobal problem too. Like, how many times has he been in these big profile situations and his teams fall up short? Now, I agree with you. It can help with a change of face. Here's what I'm going to say about Miami. You're going to have to prove to me that you won't get lost and not allow explosive plays. Joe, there were times where their front seven got pushed around. All those high talented guys got pushed around by teams that finished 6-6. So listen, man, I don't hate the hire, but I think that there's more of a rebuild defensively at Miami than people are wanting to give credit for. And I think that it comes from a mentality standpoint more than anything. You're right on one thing. If he can change the mentality, then things could be different. But there also comes a part where when I look at Oregon and I look at Miami and them having the same issues, I'm like, there's only one common denominator here.
Look, I think, though, we need to acknowledge that the roster development and building, like we've talked about with all these guys, it does fall some of it on Guidry. That those guys were not being coached because Mario Cristobal is not in the day-to-day discussions with the defense on how they need to handle certain situations and how focused they are.
Clearly he's not with the offense when he's fumbling the football instead of kneeling it.
Okay, that was 2 years ago. But
Joe,
I'm not. But Blake, I'm just saying that moving on from Guidry, and we talk about this all the time, that like the credit needs to be go to coaches that know when to cut ties and to move on and to move in a different direction. And I think that the credit needs to be given to Mario, and to go with a hire like this instead of promoting from within or just trying to bring somebody from the NFL or somebody along those lines. He sees somebody who's an up-and-comer who has been a great coach at multiple destinations and commits to him and gives him the opportunity to shine in this situation. I think we need to see the success. We need to see before we can really commit to the belief that it has something to do with the roster. And I brought this up before. They were aggressive in the portal of bringing in new corners. They were very aggressive to the point where it caused a controversy that we don't need to bring up with Xavier Lucas. He was deliberate, and this team was deliberate in finding new bodies. So I think that there is enough to go off of to believe that they're going to be improved. Not saying that they're going to be top 10 in every single defensive category, but if a guy like Steve Belichick can step in as quickly as he did, and for them to be as good as they were defensively, who says they can't lead the country in a certain defensive stat? Who says they can't do that? And in the ACC, that's enough to help you win the conference. It's not like they're battling it out with elite offensive teams every single week.
Mario Cristobal had Justin Herbert and Cam Ward and didn't make a playoff with either one of them.
I can't counter that criticism.
No, you can't. Because at some point, there comes a point of having an aura of how you lead teams. You're going to have to prove to me that you can get over the hump, Joe. I'm sorry. I don't hate the hire at all. I mean, he did really well at Minnesota. Sure, okay. But I also have not seen you as a collective administrative whole get over the hump. I don't think it's bad criticism to say I need to see you get better.
It's not bad criticism, and I understand why you're bringing it up, because we quite literally have brought this up with so many other coaches. Is like, hey, we need to actually see the results before we immediately.
There's a reason coaches got fired and hired.
Right? Exactly. If I'm trying to solve this problem, though, I'm looking across the board and I'm looking for options that are specifically going to resolve the problems that we had. I spoke really highly of the D'Anton Lynn hire because it accomplished exactly what USC needed to accomplish, which is they needed to bring in. Can I just finish? They needed to bring in a super sound, fundamental defensive coach that is a front seven first guy that was going to have an attention to detail and a pride in tackling and swarming to the football. And we saw that in the first game. Now it broke down a little bit over time, but we saw that right away in the first game. I think that we are in this same position with a team like Miami, that they're going to have improvements. And they weren't as much of a shit show as USC was when D'Anton Lynn took over. I think that in this conference that they're playing in, that doesn't have a lot of hard-nosed defenses like this, that they're going to separate themselves. It's not